Start. Thanks, Ben. So if the internet were a country, it would be the fourth largest polluter in the world. That means that's more than the UK. And I think it's also significant because we've used that stat a few times. So apologies if you've already heard it a few times. But I think when we started using that stat, that was about the seventh largest country. So we can see that this is rapidly making a change here. And I think there are other considerations to think about here. It's the metaverse, the AI could have an impact on this as well. And so this is something that is really important to us at HDK. It's something we've been thinking about a long time. I think we first became aware of it when we changed our hosting to renewable hosting for all of our websites. And we also known it through colleagues at other agencies, and we'll talk about that later on. So this is something that's important to us. It's also something important because we recently went on the B Corp journey. We're a B Corp organization now, and this was one of the things that really helped us to take the ideas that we really believed in already and put some strategy behind it to make improvements ourselves. And part of that is wanting to share our experience and with as many people, our clients and people through our webinar as possible. So that's something that we're doing here today as well. So that's today's topic. Before we go on, I would love you to introduce yourself in the chat box. We'll make this session interactive in various points, and this is the first chance for you just to find the chat room, introduce who you are, where you're from, who you work from if you're freelance, and maybe why this topic feels relevant to you at this moment in time as well. So if you start introducing yourself in the chat box, I'm going to go quiet for another 30 seconds, a minute. Once I start seeing lots of responses, I'll carry on with the webinar. Thank you, Mira. Great to see those responses coming through now. So while you're carrying on doing that, let me introduce today's speakers. Joining me today on this webinar is my colleague, Yannick. Yannick, do you want to bring the next slide up? Yannick has been on many of these webinars. So if you've been to these webinars before, hopefully you recognize Yannick. He's a great contributor to these. He's our technical lead and developer. Yannick, do you want to describe yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Yannick. I'm technical lead at HDK. I'm a white man. I'm currently wearing headphones. I've got a yellow shirt on. I've got not much hair at the top, a light beard and bright blue eyes.
Thank you, Yannick. And also joining us, and again, some of you have been coming to our webinars over the years might recognize the next person. Ben used to work for HDK full time. He then went and joined Whole Grain Digital, who have really made some important, have been leading this area very much so, I think, with some of their tools. And Ben is also working with us again in various capacities. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Hans. Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's good to be back. My name is Ben. I am a white man. I'm wearing glasses, black hair, and happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. And I thought Chad this was going to be his first webinar, but I'm told that he had actually talked about this topic. We have done this topic before. So it's actually his second webinar, but he is a really important part of HDK. He's a senior developer. He's doing some really interesting work, particularly on the All-In project with the Arts Council and the Accessibility Hub as well. So a lot to share on this topic because actually they're very closely aligned. Chad, hi.
Hi, I'm Chad, senior developer at HDK. I'm white male wearing glasses with a fairly big beard.
Yeah. I'm Hans. I'm director at HDK. I am a man in my mid-50s, little hair, but trimmed beard, brown eyes, and wearing a blue check shirt today. So those are the speakers today. If this is your first time to one of our webinars, HDK is digital marketing agency. We've been going 20 years serving the arts, culture, heritage sectors, and we mainly build websites, but we also have a marketing wing. We do digital marketing strategies, content creation as well, and we feel that those two things go well together. And as I said, today we're going to be talking about reducing your carbon footprint for your website. There's 3 areas that we're going to cover. We're going to start off with talking about website carbon emissions and what the factors around that are. We're going to explore how to measure your carbon footprint for your website and what tools are out there and the data you get from them and how you can interpret that data. And then we're going to go around the tips of how to improve your website sustainability as well. As always, we will then pause for a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll carry on with a discussion, so it's a chance for you to ask questions. As always, we will record this session. We are recording this session. We'll put it back onto our website, maybe in a couple of days' time, maybe as quickly as we can, though. But we'll also write up some notes from here. There's various tools that we're going to share with you and resources, and you don't need to take any notes. We'll put them all into the write-up on the website that we'll then email you about as well when that's live. So just sit back, enjoy, absorb, and learn as much as you can from today. And so without further ado, I think we're going to do a poll. So I said that we try and make these interactive, and the question we're going to ask today is, which area are you most interested in improving in order to reduce your website's carbon footprint? And that poll is going to come up on your screens in just a moment. And if you want to answer that, then we'll see some results for that.
You can see some results coming in.
Okay, should we give it another few seconds, and then I think, Yannick, you'll be able to bring the results up onto the screen.
Give the last few moments for anybody, and I'm going to click end poll.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So not surprising, and maybe that's why. Let's see if we do this poll again in the future with the people in the room here, whether that changes. But a lot of people not sure or don't know, and so hopefully that's useful. That's why this webinar is going to be useful. But for those of you who do have an opinion, it's around content delivery and design are the top 2, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So thanks for sharing that information. So Yannick, do you want to give an overview of the factors around website carbon emissions?
Great, yeah. So website carbon emission factors. So there are 2 main bits that I want to talk about today. I'm just going to do a sound check. Can everybody hear me okay? If I just have some thumbs up, yeah, great. Yeah. So the 2 main things that we want to talk about are what is the carbon output of a website, and what is carbon consciousness for digital. So what is the carbon output of a website? And it all boils down to one key thing, and that is how much electricity it takes to power your website and its actions. So how much electricity it takes to power your website and its actions. So electricity itself, the production of electricity, has a carbon output, and it's that we're really measuring. And there's 2 main areas that we think of when we're talking about carbon consciousness for digital, and that's server side and user side. So server side is the storage of your website files and the storage of your data. And you can think of a server as basically someone else's computer, and it's just storing your files. And it's basically a computer that's always plugged in. generally servers don't have a monitor, but you can really think of it as just a computer. So the more data you have, the more electricity is needed to power that. And the other part that we always look at as well is what's powering that server. So renewable versus non-renewable energies. And then user side, that's how much energy it takes to load the site. So for example, do you have lots of images or few images? Does it take, for example, is there 1 megabyte of data that needs to be loaded versus 20 megabytes of data? And it's really how much it takes, how much power is needed on the user's device, so their laptops, their mobiles, their computers, that they really, that's what we're talking about. And the other part is also how much energy it takes to fulfill an action. So that's normally when your website has an interaction with a database or perhaps submitting forms. And this part is normally to do with the engineering or the code. So it's normally working more at an engineering level. So the two main things that we normally talk about when we talk about carbon consciousness is how much data you're storing and what is powering that storage, and how much energy it takes to load the website. And we're going to explore today different ways of how we can measure and reduce that impact. But bringing that back to carbon consciousness, what is carbon consciousness as an idea, as a practice, as an approach? And I really like this definition. So it's an awareness and proactive reduction of your carbon footprint. And I really like this word reduction rather than elimination. And the reason is that I'm a big advocate for the positive impact of digital, the positive impact of what we can do on the web with our work. So if we can be aware of our carbon footprint and proactively reduce that, so we can be efficient with how we interact with people, how we get our message out, then we can maximize the positive impact on our work on the world, whilst reducing the negative impact on the environment through our carbon footprint.
Thank you, Yannick. And I really like that point about reduction rather than elimination. And I think, you know, we're all on a journey with this. And I think if I think about HDK, and I think how long ago we started thinking we were doing great things just by changing our hosting to renewable hosting, but how much we're still learning, and we might even come back to that later when we're talking to Ben, about how much we at HDK are doing for our own purposes and for our own website, for example. But Ben, I want to ask you a number of questions now, and maybe we can lose the slides for a bit. Can you start by explaining why it's important to measure a website's carbon footprint, and what are the benefits we can gain from this practice?
Thanks, Hans. Yeah, so the first step to understanding, what your carbon impact, what your website's carbon impact is just to have a gauge or a method by which you can start to measure it. It's important to measure because then you know which areas to tackle first, be that green hosting, content, or anything else. And I think Chad will touch on this a little bit later, but there's a double whammy, if you like, whereby if you can measure and reduce your carbon footprint, your whole site gets better anyway, because it impacts performance. It can impact accessibility, SEO. If your site is faster, it will rank higher on Google. That's pretty well known in the SEO space. So there's multiple benefits for improving your website as a whole. And in terms of measuring, there's a few tools. Is now a good time to share, Hans?
Yeah, I was literally going to ask you to share some of the tools that are good for measuring carbon footprint.
Sure. Okay, then I'll share my screen. And so this is the original. This is called websitecarbon.com, and it was built by Wholebrain Digital in around 2017, I believe. It's currently in its third iteration in terms of the methodology that's used to run the calculation. And you can read about that in the how does it work section, but I'm not going to cover that today because it can get pretty technical. But it's pretty simple. You just scroll down to the URL bar And we're going to just test Amazon, for example. We're going to click calculate. It will take a few seconds, and then it will come back with a carbon rating. So they've part of the version 3 is having a scale, and this scale is really important because it's a lot easier to comprehend than just going, oh, this website emits 2 grams of CO2 per page load. That's helpful, but it's not very useful in terms of a scale of just understanding the whereabouts you're at. You don't really know what the average is. You don't know what's bad, what's good. So they've invented this scale, and again, you can find the information to that on this page, which is explains exactly how it works. I'm going to just scroll down to the graph that I need to show you all. So here we can see that Amazon scores a D, and that's not amazing. It would be better if it was around a B or an A. You can see that the global average is anything below an E. And if we flip to the graph, I can show you what that means in real terms. So the calculations used to run this center around the file size of your website, and that's how much data is being sent to your browser when you load the page. And so you can see that E equates to about 2 megabytes. This is in kilobytes, but 2,000 kilobytes is 2 megabytes. So you want to be well below that as much as you can. So yeah, that's this is the OG, if you like. But there is another tool that I'm quite excited by, and this is called Cabin Analytics. It's a really lightweight Google Analytics alternative, which has CO2 calculations built into it, but it has a similar tool. So we'll do the same test, amazon.co.uk. And you can see that this is a cached result. So someone's tested this before, so we'll check it again. And you can see it will have a lot of the same statistics, but it will also tell you the megabyte size. So you can see this is 3.73 megabytes, which actually would equate to well below the industry average, which is pretty bad for Amazon. So that's unfortunate. So yeah, those are the 2 tools I'm really excited by at the moment. There are plenty more available, which I'll share in the resources at the end of the webinar.
Yeah, I don't know Cabin one so well. I've not had a chance to play with that one, but I'm very familiar with the other one that Whole Grain Digital created. And in my head, I like the simplicity of it. I understand there's more nuance behind the science, and you can get more sophisticated, but for me it reminds me of the recycling system we have in the UK. You can have some boroughs that have just give you one bin and you put everything in it and they sort it out, and people understand it. It's simple, they know what they're doing. And then you've got places where there's lots of different bins and maybe it's too complicated for people. So I like the way that it has that nice grading system. That reminds me of the energy charts that you get on appliances that you buy. So again, it's that sort of familiarity for people. So yeah, nice.
In fact, it was actually modeled off that idea of going, this house is a grade B or whatever. So it's exactly the same principle. But yeah, there's plenty of documentation about how that's all been designed. I'd encourage you to read through it if you're interested. But for the purposes of measurement as a first-hand tool, I think the grading system is really useful, and it's great to just get a bench line mark of where you're at.
And on HDK, we have over 100 websites that we manage, and we use that at the moment. We're using that just to give a grade for all of our client websites, so we can understand where improvements can be made. So yeah, we're using that one at the moment. In terms of when we get the results from these tools, how should we interpret them, and what do you think we could be looking for?
Sure. So like I said, the main thing you want to find out is the weight, if you like, of the website. So that's how much data is being transferred. So the Cabin Analytics one will tell you. I think the website Carbon tells you that somewhere as well. But that's really what you want to be looking at, and you want to be looking, once you know what that is, be that through the grading system or through that tool, you want to work to reduce the weight of the files. And you can do that a number of ways, which I think Chad will touch on in a second. But generally, there are lots of actions you can take that are either quick wins, and there are other actions you can take which will be really involved. So it will become then a priority decision of which ones you want to, or have the resources to tackle first. Generally, this will be around content, you're being on a green web hosting provider, because that does make a massive difference to the calculations in these models. But you want to be looking for ways to essentially reduce the weight of every page on your website, and there are plenty of ways that we can go about that.
And are there any, you know, I alluded to the recycling system, which is, you know, it can be simple but not perfect. What are the not perfect parts of this? How accurate are the scores? Does it give us the real picture? What sort of things should we be aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, as you saw in that example, there are slightly different results. So, you know, website carbon put it as a D, which was around 2 megabytes. But the other one put it at an F because it was around 3.73 megabytes. So that's really the biggest difference. And you will find that there's unfortunately not that much consistency in how these various different tools measure the websites. And that's not because anyone's trying to con you or it's gone wrong or whatever. It's really because there's such a massive variance in how you can measure a website. So if you think about the website, you've got the data center or the server that it's being served from. You've then got the device that you're loading it on, whether it be that a mobile, a tablet, or desktop device. You've got the browser you're running. You've got the operating system you're running. You've got where you are in the world. If you are in Australia, and you're loading a website from the UK, that data's got to go all the way around the world rather than being served from Australia. So when you compound all of these factors, it's actually incredibly difficult to measure, get an accurate, fully accurate measurement of that data transfer metric. And as the calculations are all built off that, you will see some variance. It's not, I wouldn't say it's significant. I think you just got to find a tool that you really like and trust and stick with that one, because the important thing is to measure it in the first place. And these are always going to be an estimation at this point in time. Unfortunately, I just don't think that we're there in terms of a fully comprehensive model. And as you look through the documentation, you'll see that people have been looking at this for a while, and it's pretty extensive what they've dug into. So it's just a combination of all those different factors, and you've got to take them all under consideration.
I think that's really interesting, and I think we're probably used to that. I mean, Google Analytics is probably the most useful or the most used tool for measuring, benchmarking your website. But we know that it's never exact. It's never it's not 100% accurate, and I guess it's typical, and that, just as you say, goes to the complications that we have with getting websites out there and all the content and all the stuff that we're serving. So that's really interesting.
I mean, you touched on Google Analytics. You know, for example, there are plenty more URLs on your website. Every image asset has a URL. Some of your files, like your sitemap for SEO, that's not really indexed. I mean, it is indexed by Google, but it's not served as a page in Google Analytics. So even that tool is not going to completely you know, it crawl the entire website. So you're right, there's plenty of nuance to it.
Brilliant, right. Thank you for that, Ben. So thanks for giving us an overview of the tools that we can use and how we can measure our websites. It sounds like it's something that anyone can do, anyone here can do, and you know, I know from experience that it's really easy to do and fun to do as well. So and we'll be sharing the links with that as in the resources. So that's measuring. So now I want to move on to tips that we can share with you, things that we can be doing to improve our website sustainability. So again, on the basis that this is a journey of always learning new things here, and going to bring Chad in at this point. So Chad, overall, what are the strategies that we're thinking about when we're talking about minimizing the resources our websites use without compromising performance, I guess?
So one of the nicest things about this topic is that performance and greenness of our site is intimately linked. So you kind of get both simultaneously. So if you increase the performance of your site, you're also reducing the amount of carbon it produces. So it's kind of a win-win situation in many respects. But there's two big areas that we can concentrate on in terms of increasing performance and increasing our green credentials. Is the first biggest, and perhaps the biggest one, and I'll touch back on it in a minute, is media, right? Without a doubt, the media that we are loading through our sites is the single biggest factor of the size of our sites.
So Chad, just to pause you there, that ties in exactly with a question that Ruby's just put in the chat, where she'd love to know practical tips for images. When you're talking about media, we're talking about images, aren't we?
Yeah, images and video in particular, and to a lesser degree sound files, but that's not as common, but definitely images and video. So I'll touch back on that in a second. And the second thing is using the correct tools or the correct frameworks for the sites that we have. So that's another big one. If we're just having a little pamphlet site, do we need a full-on content management system like WordPress that is loading up a whole bunch of scripts and stuff on every load? Simultaneously, do we need something like a full-blown React site to serve something that doesn't require all that interactive stuff, because that's pushing a whole lot of calculations and performance things straight onto the client. So every time you load it, it's not being cached, etc. So those are the two big things: is media and getting the correct tools. So getting the correct tools is a matter of I guess putting aside your preferences, talking to your developers and that kind of thing, and trying to figure out what the actual need is in terms of your website. What is the best tool to both make it easy for you as a user of that site, easy for your clients, but also that it's matching purpose in the most efficient way. And then the media is the other one. And I guess the single best thing we can do currently is changing the format that we are serving our media in. So for about a millennia, JPEG has been our standard media format for images. And a JPEG is an amazing media format, but it is still quite a hefty image algorithm compression. Recently, we've got WebP that has come out. It is now supported by all major browsers for, I think, like the last couple of years. So most of your visitors will be able to use WebP unless they're using like Safari from 2019 or something like that. They should be able to serve or get WebP images. So WebP is a great image format. In some instances, it can be 90% more efficient than JPEG for compressing images. So it makes incredible gains, and most imaging processing software now supports it. Even our slow boats over at Adobe now support WebP, so you can save WebPs directly from Photoshop. So that's one thing. And there are other modern, newer formats like AVIF, which are even better than WebP, but it doesn't have quite as wide support. So you can talk to your developer about serving multiple multiple formats and having sensible fallbacks if the browser doesn't support it. So that's the biggest ones in terms of images. And then also making sure that we're serving the correct size of image. So if you've got like a massive 5 megabyte image, that's 5 megabytes that are being pulled down the wire. So are we serving the correct image sizes that we need? Are we serving responsive images at mobile size? Are they small enough? And those things. So those are fairly easy wins, because you can reduce the size of your website fairly quickly by just managing your images correctly.
I think that's a really important one, and I always been involved with websites for a long time, and I've seen so many times when, to be fair, it does take a bit of training, but people upload a whole image that's being sent by a photographer, and it goes straight onto the website, and it's a massive file. So I think that's a really important thing. I think the WebP thing is something probably people don't know that's out there. So I think that's really interesting. And these are things that everyone here today can take an impact or have a go at doing and making a contribution, I guess. I think when we were talking beforehand, Ben, you had a tool for this as well, didn't you?
Yeah, there's a tool called Image Carbon, which is kind of the same concept as Website Carbon, but just for images. So yeah, I was just playing around that before the webinar. I'm happy to put that in the chat as well. Yeah, and it just goes through all the images on a web page, and then it tells you how much they weigh, and then how much they could weigh if they were converted to optimized formats, as Chad's just covered. So it's really useful for seeing sort of a actionable improvement that you could make.
Yeah. I saw a question further up. Sorry, what is the? Yeah. Rachel asked the question, what is the image size you'd recommend? And I'm guessing this is a really impossible question to answer in many ways. I don't know. It really does depend on the design of the website. But I think it's the point about if the template requires an image that's 600 by 800 pixels, that's the size you want to be uploading for that. How does that work with content management systems, which then will take that one image and post it on different formats for different devices? Does that change at all, or is it always the same image there?
That would be a matter of, again, talking to your developer so that they are using correct settings in the CMS. Because modern CMSs like WordPress or Cabin or any of those other, not Cabin, Craft, beg your pardon, should by default sort of create a variety of image sizes. When you upload an image, it will sort of save like 5 different sizes. And setting that up correctly with your developer will make sure that the correct size is being used in the correct context.
And Rachel has just qualified her question with saying she's actually talking about quality. So going back to her question, what is the image quality you'd recommend? And I guess we're talking about here compression, and that sort of, does that tie in with the tool that you were talking about, Ben?
Not necessarily compression, but conversion. I mean, you can compress images, but then they end up, well, sometimes they end up losing their quality. I think what Chad's referring to is simply just a different image format. I think so WebP and AVIF are very efficient formats for the web. And you can use an app like Squoosh to just see it. Like they have a little slider, and it will literally show you that there's very little difference in having the image as a JPEG versus a WebP. In fact, sometimes it looks better, in my opinion. And you've also saved on file size. But there are also plenty of plugins that you can use with WordPress that do that automatically as you upload JPEGs. So definitely want to just speak to your development team about.
And then Ruby also asks about formatting WebP. Just in case, is it just a case of saving the file in a different format, or is there any way to reformat a media library en masse?
So again, for WordPress, if you are using WordPress, there are plugins that'll just do it en masse. So that's very powerful. Some web servers will be doing that as well. So they'll have like down at the server side, little tools that will do that as well. So you can talk to your hosting provider or your web developer for those kinds of things. And then just on a day-to-day basis, most image editing tools will allow you to now save as WebP. So if you're using something like Lightroom or Photoshop or any of those kinds of tools, you should now be able to save it directly as that. I mean, I think even Paint on Windows now supports it as well. So literally anything now should be able to save as something like WebP.
You touched on hosting just a second ago, and that prompted me of another question about what impact, and we've touched on it a couple of times, what impact does hosting and green hosting have on the website? Yeah, that's the question, Chad.
So obviously, if your host is green and using renewable resources, then it's taking care of its own carbon footprint, right? It doesn't mean that we need to then abandon our responsibilities on the other side. But you're reducing the cost of the storage side of things. And that's a massive thing if you think about all the storage that's going in and all these like enormous server farms across the world. That's a ton of stuff. So if you're hosting everything with a green provider, it's a very easy win. But then there is still the stuff that we need to do on the other side, on the client side, essentially, that is our responsibility.
And I think part of the question was, do we recommend any green hosts? HDK have been partnering with Cloud Above for many years. So all our clients have Cloud Above hosting. I think either Yannick or Ben has been talking to me about another host that's maybe notable here. I think it was you, Ben. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've just put a few that I've worked with in the past. Kinsta's really, really, really good. But so is Cloud Above. We love Cloud Above. They're really, really helpful. Their support team is unmatched. Big shout out to them. But yeah, Kinsta is a really huge web host that's backed by Google. They use their infrastructure, so it's a pretty premium service, and it is also powered by renewable energy. But yeah, there's plenty out there. You can also find out more about which web hosts are out there. There's a website called the Green Web Foundation, and there's a checker there where you can there's a list of approved green web hosts that they have verified use renewable energies. So you can have a look through that list. Again, I can put that in the chat at the end, and you can then do your research and make a choice about which web host you might like to use.
I think the thing for me I've noticed is that there's just so many more of them now than there were. I mean, when we changed 10 years ago, there are just so many more of them there. So there's a lot of good ones to choose from. And Scott is giving a shout out for Crystal as well in the chat. I wanted to move. We were talking about images, but I wanted to talk about design in general. And we haven't got one of our web designers here in the room today, but what impact that can have, and what your thoughts there are, Chad.
I came across an article the other day that maybe helped to clarify it a little bit, because obviously design is, it's going to have so many factors according to your needs and your industry and all sorts of things. But they said that make sure that, Earth is a partner at your design meetings. So like putting that first, putting that as essentially giving them a seat at the table, like a consideration, like do we need a full bleed massive image here above the fold on our homepage? How can we reduce that? How can we rethink what we need in order to communicate our message and make the website more carbon friendly? So there's no way of I think solving the problem of sustainable design immediately. It needs to be a constant back and forth, a set of questions that we're asking, like, does this work? Does this reduce the impact? Are we having unnecessary animations? Are we loading up 30 images above the fold? Is that costing more essentially in terms of energy than if we had other solutions?
I think it strikes me sort of, I'm always slightly outside the process, but sort of, and get little insights when we're building websites. But it is always a sort of a tussle between having, dare I say, it's designs that maybe look more contemporary, and as you say, you talk about full bleed images and whizzy videos and those sort of things that excite clients often, and then trying to sort of temper down that ambition to make things. So it always feels there's a little bit of compromise there. I think. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, you look like you had an answer there.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuanced. I think I've been on both sides of this because I've worked with clients more in the charity and information space as well as in the art space. And there is a very big difference in the needs there. So like you said at the beginning, Hans, in the arts, it is very much engaging content. There are entire teams to make promo videos and really engaging print designs and all that sort of stuff, which needs to be reflected on the web as well. Conversely, charities or some of the information-based sites that I was working with don't have that need, and they certainly don't have the content available to share. So what I'd actually recommend doing is really working with a trusted designer to look at other ways that you could generate content that doesn't involve images or involves fewer images. And by that, I mean, there's plenty of design methods available. There's animation, there's typography, there's use of colors and gradients, there's transitions between pages. There's a lot there that could be thought about if you went right back to basics of design, rather than just taking a picture and uploading it on the website. You've got to think about how can you best convey your message as the arts organization about your event or your community that may not even require an image in the first place.
Thank you. We've got, I see it as two sides. We've got the people who are responsible for building your website, the developers, the designers, and then there are people, usually our clients, who manage the site, the content managers, the web managers, those people, and what they can do. What are the things that those people on that side, not our side, need to be doing? And we've talked a lot about images. Obviously, we've talked about choosing green web hosts if it's your job. And I think, I think we've probably answered. I've seen some answers in the chat as well to some of the questions there. What other things should they be having in their mind when they are trying to do or make an impact on their side? Is there anything else that we haven't covered?
So if you're managing your content, the biggest single thing you can do is remove the cruft. Get rid of the stuff that you aren't using. So we tend to kind of like use our websites as an archive, as a repository of everything our company or our organization has done. And then we end up with these endless pages that are being stored, and all the media associated with those that are being stored. I mean, it's good marketing to get rid of them anyway, i.e. that people aren't getting lost in this endless content, but also good in terms of just reducing the amount of storage that you're using. So that's one big thing a content manager can do, or a marketer. The second thing, and not everyone's going to like this, but is reducing the use of analytics and other third-party scripts. So every time we pop like a Metapixel or Google Analytics into our website, because we have certain things that we want to be tracking, we have no control over those scripts and what they download. So you go and you go, okay, well, I'm going to add in Google Analytics. It's a single script. But Google Analytics then goes and downloads like 10 or 15 scripts, and you have no control over what they're doing. So one of the other things is, what is our, do we need as a tool like Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics, is it providing the things that we actually need? Are there other ways that we can track our marketing goals that are internal, that are in-house, that don't require these sort of massive scripts to be running? So that's my takeaway, but marketers may not like that.
If I may, I'll just build on those points as well, Chad, because I completely agree. And the content, I think a good way of auditing your content would just be looking at whatever analytics you do have. And let's say your site's, I don't know, been around for 5 years and it's got 2,000 pages. Just have a look at how many pages have actually received hits in the last 6 months. And I'd bet it's maybe a quarter of them, meaning that the other 3/4 could be reconsidered, they could be redrafted, they could be deleted, they could be archived, they could be saved as PDFs, and you've massively reduced your impact there. And then secondly, on the analytics point, yes, there are other platforms, because of GA4 now being implemented whole scale. I've found a lot of people are just really unhappy with it. It's quite hard to use. It's a big learning curve. It tracks a lot of data. There's privacy implications that you have to be really careful about. So there's a big move to cookieless tracking with platforms like Cabin, Plausible. There are a few others. I think some other people have shared them in the chat. So have a look into cookieless tracking, because generally those scripts will be lightweight. You'll have more control. They don't require a GDPR banner. And yeah, just to completely agree, Chad.
Great, thank you, guys. I'm going to take a pause for a moment. I can see some really interesting questions. We always have a discussion bit, so I'm going to come back to some of those questions. And I think I'm going to ask you each to give your one tip or one takeaway for today. Before that, we've got a little bit of housekeeping to do. The first thing we like to do at all of these webinars, we do them for free. We love doing them, but we want to always make them relevant to you. And it's great that so many of you have joined us today. So we'd love you to fill out the survey. I'm going to, Yannick's put the link in the chat box. I'm going to go quiet just for a minute and give you, I think it's about 4 or 5 very simple questions to answer. We're going to go quiet while we scroll through some of the questions you've already answered and give you time to fill out the survey without me rabbiting on. And then when you've done it, if you can just type done in the chat box, when we see a few of those, we'll just pick up where we left off. Please keep completing those surveys if you're just finishing them off. I think I'm going to carry on with the housekeeping so we can leave as much time for a few more questions. And first of all, I'm going to just say is we are at the AMA conference in Brighton in 2 weeks' time. Antonia is doing a talk on the second day, on the Friday, about with the Arts Council about using the All-In as a case study for making an accessible website. So do try and go to that if you can. Also, for the first time, we're going to have our own stand there. So if you come to our webinars and you see us at the stand, please come up and say hello. We've got some prize giveaways, we've got some fun, fun activity, and we would just love to say hello and speak to you. So do come up and join us. Yannick's going to be there, I'm going to be there, and some other colleagues, including Antonio, will be there as well. So look out for us if you're coming to the AMA conference next week, I think. And also, we've got more webinars. We have just put the next 12 webinars on the website, or for the next 12 months. Coming up are on the screen now are the next 3 webinars. So if you haven't signed up to those, you can go along and sign up to them and get a reminder nearer the time. Also, if you want to be told about our newsletters, our webinars in advance, you can join up our quarterly newsletter. We send it out every 3 months. It has marketing tips, case studies, industry insights, write-ups from the webinars, that sort of thing. And also, if there's any question you don't get a chance to ask us in this, or we don't get a chance to answer in this webinar, and you want to just follow up, we love getting emails from you. So just send us an email, hello@wearehdk.com, and we'll get back to you on that as well. So I think that's the housekeeping. Let's get back to your questions. I don't know, team, were there any questions you want to jump in with an answer?
Yeah,
I like to, yes.
sorry,
You
there
go
was
first, Ben.
one further. I promised somebody that they were having trouble with image carbon, so I was going to show them a way to just find the image weight. So if I'll just play around with that now, if I may. If image carbon isn't returning your images for any reason, you can always just use website carbon, or you can use a tool called Screaming Frog, which is an SEO crawling software. But if you just wanted a quick look, you can do something like this, which is GT metrics. And this is quite a technical tool to use. But you can see that you can change the browser. This is, as I touched on earlier, you can change the browser location. You have to sign up to an account, but it's the same idea. And then this will test, and it will tell you the proportion of images to your content and everything else. So it will show you, maybe I'll come back at the end when it's finished its analysis, just how much, what's making up your web page. So whether that's font assets, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, images, videos, etc. And then you can see sort of a real-time measurement of which content type you might want to focus in on.
Great,
I'll show
thank
you
you.
once it's finished its analysis.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Denny had an interesting question. Do you have any tips about achieving sustainability while also considering good accessibility?
So there's oh, go on, Chad.
I just, one of the a lot of these kind of issues around sustainability, performance, and accessibility are incredibly tightly linked. And that's, performance wins are oftentimes also accessibility wins. I mean, there's a whole lot of accessibility specific stuff that we could talk through, but generally speaking, good performance helps with accessibility. So your basic principles that are good web development, good web design, end up with better performance and better sustainability. So if we're just looking at, achieving a more carbon neutral or carbon reduced website, then we also are achieving a certain amount of accessibility as well. And if we're making a more accessible website, we should be getting, performance gains as well. So there should be, like a tight interlocking between those.
And also on that, and you hinted at this earlier on, but also it improves SEO as well. So it's a win-win-win, in so many ways, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I saw something from, I think it was Ruby said something a moment ago. Oh yeah. So this is a good point, I think. And this, and I'm sorry if we already covered it, because I'm looking in different places. I sometimes miss what we've said, but Ruby's asking about the toss up between measuring an individual page and a whole website. Did you get a chance to touch on that, Ben, much?
I'm not sure I did.
Because I know we've talked about it a lot.
Yeah, generally there has been a big challenge in generating carbon scores for every single page of a website. And that's partly due to some of the technical limitations. So for example, all those other URLs that Google doesn't necessarily pick up, like your sitemap, do you account for them or not? But it's also a lot of the tools we've shared today just do a single page analysis. Generally speaking, if there are recommendations that come off the back of those tools, they apply globally anyway. So if you optimize your images on bulk, that's going to have a great impact across the site. But yeah, it's still becoming, it's getting easier with tools, that analytics tools that are capable of tracking every single page of your site, but there are fewer of them. So the ones I know of are things like Screaming Frog SEO, which is a website crawling software that's really good, and they've just integrated CO2 measurement into that platform. Carbon Analytics, I think some other people have shared some other ones in the chat as well today, but that Screaming Frog is my main recommendation for full-scale audits.
And Scott has very kindly just direct message me, not wanting to hijack the thing, but Scott has got a tool. Do you want to put that into the chat as well, Scott? And that apparently tests the footprint of the homepage and the first 50 pages as well. So
Great, thanks, Scott.
Yeah, feel free to share that, Scott. Thank you for that question, Ruby. Do we see any? I'm scrolling through the chat now. Can anyone see any other questions that we should be picking up?
Ruby has one. I think it might be the same Ruby.
Yeah.
Are there any examples of scrolling carousels above the fold on home pages as being efficient, or are these always going to be an unnecessarily heavily load? I think this links back to the discussion when Chad was talking about having the earth at the table when you're thinking about design. So carousels by their nature are multiple elements, and they have to have functionality, so they have to have additional scripts to work. So if you're going to use a carousel, by its nature, it's going to have a heavier load than not using it. So there's a question there to be talking about. Is it necessary? How can we, is there another way of achieving what we're trying to achieve with this carousel? So for example, as Ben was saying, are you able to, instead of having multiple videos, have one video where you've spliced together the clips that you want? Would that achieve what your carousel is? Are there different ways you can serve, instead of having multiple images on your carousel, would it be one image that perhaps has the different elements of the different places? So this would be the part to kind of look through to see if the carousel is required. Then if you are going to use it, then it's really important to treat the images and check in with the actual carousel that you're using to see at a development level how it can be efficient.
Right. I'm going to try and round up now because I'm conscious of the time. We've got 3 minutes left. I just want to quickly answer Amanda's question. As an artist, I'm a bit lost. I want to improve, but I built my own website and have no developer to ask, is it possible to do this as a non-techie? And I would just say that, you know, I think what we've wanted to try and get across is that there isn't an absolute way of doing this. It's, you know, it's a journey. It's learning different tips. There are definitely tips here that non-techie people can do. You know, just understanding a bit about your media use, for example. I think just trying to reduce clicks on your website, and you know, that's about navigation. That's about the site architecture. That's about how much content you have. Those sorts of things all help to do that. So it's definitely things there. And I hope if you go back and review the recording of this, there'll be lots of non-techie tips there that you can take with you. Finally, Yannick, Ben, Chad, one tip to take away from that, maybe that you think is an important thing. One takeaway from today. Yannick.
Hi everyone. So I suppose my tip would be treat your images before you use them. So check what format you've got them in and check to see if you can reduce the size of the image, as in its megabytes, without affecting quality. And I'd say this is a really good one, Amanda, for in particular if you're handling just your own website. There's a lot of tools out there just to reduce the size of the image, and then that will immediately be able to affect your carbon rating.
Right, thank you, Yannick. Ben?
Mine would be to move to a green web host if you're not already on one. It's super easy to do. A lot of hosting companies will offer free migrations anyway, and you'll see your carbon scores across the board improve on every page of your website in one fell swoop.
Right, good one. Thank you, Ben. And Chad?
Limit your third-party scripts. So limit your analytics, limit your reliance on things like YouTube as much as possible.
Great. That's a really good tip as well. Thank you. Great. I think that brings us to the hour. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Yannick, Ben and Chad for their prep for today as well. And it's been a really, I really enjoyed today. There's been lots of interaction, lots of questions. It's obviously an important topic. I think it's really having a moment at the moment. So I think, you know, it's great that you've come. So please hope to see you at future webinars. And thank you for coming today, everyone. Thank you.